All right, I'm gonna get started, and thank you for coming out for our monthly Buyer-Seller Hotline. This is a space for us to, hey from Ottawa, hi. This is a space to chat, to share insights, to ask questions, to hear different perspectives on hot topics in the vintage, antiques, and secondhand world. And tariffs have been the hot topic the past few months. So that's what we've been mostly talking about so far on this little session. One day we'll get back to something a little more vintage and antiques focused, but tariffs are the thing right now. So we're going to talk about that today. We're bringing together buyers, sellers, and vintage lovers on this call so that we can better understand each other and trade experiences and ideas and that kind of thing. So the idea is that you can participate in this, drop your thoughts and your questions in the comments. They can go by kind of quickly. I have my moderator to, I've just got to add my moderator. Hold on. I thought I added. Hopefully that worked. I've got my moderator here to keep track of the comments, and if I miss something, don't be shy, just pop back on and I will address it before we wrap up. If you're feeling really chatty, this is meant to be like a little radio show, so if you want to come on live, just drop a phone emoji in the comments and I will try to invite you in on video if that's something that you'd want to do. So while folks are settling in, just tell me where you're joining from tonight. I think I saw Ottawa and Toronto come up and a few other waves. Love to know where everybody's visiting from. If we haven't met, I am Kristina Urquhart, the publisher of The Vintage Seeker, which helps secondhand sellers reach shoppers. Just a second, I'm having problems with my moderator. Maybe my moderator can leave and come back, and then I can try again. Sorry about that. Okay. Anyways, sorry about that. The Vintage Seeker is an independent media brand that helps secondhand sellers and buyers, and I launched it in April 2021. I run a website, newsletters, social media, downloads, events, exclusive content, all that kind of good stuff, and I've been publishing for about 20 years, creating content for niche communities. I'm not a seller, and I think that's important to note, but I'm a very dedicated vintage shopper. Supporting independent, small, or local businesses is something that I am passionate about. So last fall, I launched the Shop Secondhand directory, which features over 3,000 vintage and secondhand shops and services across Canada and the United States. It's a great resource for finding unique businesses and events and services and all that kind of stuff, and you can check it out at the link in my bio. Try this moderator thing one more time. Otherwise, moderator, you're just gonna have to kind of let me know what's going on in the comments. Okay. So the directory is free to search for buyers, and for sellers, it's free to list your business as well. So if you're not already on there, it's a great marketing tool, especially in these times that we're in. There are options as well to upgrade your listing for better placement. I also run the Vintage Sellers community, which is a membership for dealers, and we are focused on networking and professional development. So if you're a seller looking to connect with other sellers and your peers and level up your business, you can join us there at the link in my bio. So if you're just joining us, don't hesitate to jump in and let me know where you are from, and drop a phone emoji if you want to join this conversation on camera, or just use the comments. I'm happy to hear from you. It's meant to be kind of like a hangout, even though I'm the one who's kind of in the hot seat. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to talk tariffs tonight, so and what's happening right now. If you don't know what a tariff is or how it works, go back to my last two hotline sessions. They are in my reels. There are very detailed explanations there. And there's also more information via an article that I've posted at the link in my bio. So if you've just dropped in to see what this is all about and you don't order or ship from across the border and that you don't think tariffs apply to you, I encourage you to hang out for a little bit, because we're going to talk about the impact of tariffs, even if you aren't going to be tariffed directly. So if you joined me last time, you're going to already know this, but I am a indie media publisher. I'm not an economist or a tariff expert, but I did cover manufacturing and importing and exporting during the renegotiation of the last free trade agreement that we had, the one that's still there right now. I don't have deep knowledge, but I have pretty good knowledge, and I've spent a lot of time researching over the past couple of months what's going on in order to bring you some information as it pertains to this space, because I know there's not a lot of information out there. I'm located in Canada, but I'm going to do my best to bring you information as it affects all parties involved in this new trade war that we're in. So I want you to feel free to share your frustrations and your fears and your concerns and questions in the comments. But just a friendly reminder before we kind of start talking about all this stuff to please be respectful of each other. And at the same time, you know, people are sharing their personal thoughts and opinions. I have a wide-reaching audience. I'm grateful for our Canadian community, our American community, and our international community. And, you know, if anybody is not being respectful, we'll have to remove you from the chat. So with that being said, I'd love to hear about how you're feeling right now in the comments, just while we get into it. I think, you know, I know there's a lot of people who are worried or scared or frustrated. Some people who are kind of waiting and seeing, thinking that this is all going to blow over in a few days. I hope that it does. You know, some people feel that tariffs might have a positive effect. So I'd love to know all of your viewpoints. If you want to drop them below, let me know how you're feeling right now. While you do that, I think I'm going to go over a little bit of a summary of what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about this whole what's happening right now, the de minimis thing, what goods are affected. We're going to zoom out a little bit and talk about the short, medium, and long-term impacts of this and how that might play out and kind of the next steps for both buyers and sellers. All right, so again, feel free to use the chat. Don't be shy. I'm very curious to know how everyone is kind of responding to this. So again, if you just joined us, if you don't know what a tariff is, go back and watch my last couple of reels. There's a lot of information in those previous buyer-seller hotlines, who pays the tariff. Again, lots of info on that. Just for context in this discussion, it's the importer, which means the customer or the company that is purchasing the item and then receiving it in their own country, that is going to be paying that tariff, right? So quick summary of what's happened the last couple of days. The US yesterday on March 4th, placed 25% tariffs on all goods of Canada and Mexico. And these are called the US tariffs, or the Trump tariffs that they're being referred to. In response, Canada has placed 25% tariffs on some goods in the United States. These are called retaliatory tariffs, or they're also known as a surtax. So I'm putting together a detailed list of what products are involved in that pertain to this space, but it's not quite finished yet. But suffice it to say, it's most of what you are buying and selling. Charm Christmas and more. Hopeful there won't be too many impacts since the de minimis won't impact my small sales to the US. Worried about general costs are going to go up for citizens, which will impact consumer spending. Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about all that. Thanks for volunteering that. Okay, so the retaliatory tariffs from Canada there's some of them that are in place now, and in 3 weeks we're expected to see a lot more of them. So, you know, we'll see what happens in 3 weeks. It sounds like there's some discussions already happening today. So, you know, fingers crossed that doesn't happen. In both cases, in order to qualify for a tariff, the product needs to be a country of origin of Canada or Mexico if the good is entering into the US, meaning that it was manufactured in Canada or Mexico. And then, you know, the reverse applies for Canada. If there's a country of origin of the United States, and it's entering Canada, then it gets that tariff applied, right? So when we're talking about this de minimis thing, this exemption, it's the duty-free exemption, right? And the US has so far kept its de minimis exemption in place, meaning that the goods valued under US $800 are not being tariffed right now. So you might have also heard this referred to as Section 321. That's what it is. The US government, though, has stated that exemption will be removed. So I think that's important to note, because I got a lot of messages yesterday saying, like, you know, de minimis is here, we're fine. And yes, it is here for now. You are fine for now. So if you are a seller, we want to start thinking about what happens if that exemption gets removed, right? Charm Christmas and more for resale. How does that work, e.g. selling something made in Japan? Yes, great question. So if you are a seller in Canada, as I know you mentioned you're in Ottawa, and you're selling something to a customer in the US and that item is made in Japan, you mark that the country of origin is Japan, and it wouldn't be tariffed if it was over $800, right? Because we're talking about that duty-free exemption now anyway, so it doesn't even matter because it's under $800. But it wouldn't be tariffed at the same rate, right? Once we hit $800 though, there are like various duties that are applied. So yes, you still have to put the country of origin on everything though. That's what they're encouraging you to do. I think technically you could get away with just putting it if it's Canada, Mexico, China, or Hong Kong, but the best practice is just to write that country of origin on the outside, and they know. So you won't be subject to any, tariff or inspection if that item is coming from a Canadian shop, but it's not a product that's made in Canada. So as I was saying, the de minimis in the US, there are plans to remove it. The language is, we're going to remove it once we have the infrastructure in place in order to collect the duties. So that might never happen. We don't know. But, if this trade war kind of continues on, then it's something that we have to kind of plan for, right? And I think the next few weeks will be probably quite indicative of whether or not we can expect that to be removed or not. If it looks like everybody's kind of digging in their heels, I think that we can expect that de minimis may be at least lowered, if not removed altogether. Okay, so Chris, for Canada, we have to use HTS US tariff codes on everything. Exactly. Yes, you should be adding the HTS code on everything, and we'll go over that in a little bit. Postmodern Bohemian, so if I'm buying Barabo craft from a US seller, no tariff. So if you are buying from a US seller and it is under $150 Canadian, because that's our duty-free exemption, then you won't pay any tariff. If it is an item that is made in the US though, and it is over $150 Canadian and you're importing it into Canada from a US seller, then yes, you would have to pay that 25% surtax, depending again on what the product is. It's a very long list of products though, so we can assume that you would have to pay the tariff if it's over that 150, and I'll go over that again in a second because I know it's very confusing. So again, if you are in the US, you order and it's from a Canadian seller and it is under US $800, no tariff going to be charged to you. Doesn't matter where it's from, no tariff, no additional duties or tariffs applied. Yes, Chris, the $150, so that's custom duties. So there's taxes on anything. You have to pay taxes when the item hits $40. So you will have to pay something. But in Canada, we don't refer to it as de minimis quite the same way, but it is the same thing. It's a $150 threshold for customs duties. So that's called like a value for duty. And I just confirmed today that like Canada's de minimis equivalent is still in place. So if you're ordering an item that's under $150, you should be fine according to the government documentation, right? So again, tariffs are going to be charged in the US for anything over $800 US, right? So if you're importing something that's over $800, and I'm bringing this up because I know that there's a lot of really small value shipments that are crossing the border in this space in particular, right? We're talking like Etsy things and $100 things, $50 things, $200 things. But there are a lot of sellers out there that are over that exemption. They're sending higher value shipments, they're sending bulk. I just heard from a jewelry seller today who is regularly moving parcels over $800 US across the border, right? So they're affected by this. People who are doing large furniture deliveries, any of that kind of stuff. So there are a variety of people that are affected in different ways in this space. So again, where you are shipping from doesn't matter, right? It's the country of origin. So that's important to note. If you're a seller in Canada and you're shipping an item that's country of origin in the UK, and you've noted that on your customs form, your customer in the US wouldn't be tariffed regardless of anything else, right? It's only about the country of origin, Canada, Mexico, China, or Hong Kong. So Canada doesn't care about country of origin from stuff coming from the US. We do to know that it's from the US. So it's in the same way. Like a US seller would want to put the country of origin so that if it's not a US made product, then they're not going to get, then their customer being you in Canada would not get charged by that tariff. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. I know it's it's very confusing, especially when we're talking about the fact that the customer is the one who has to pay. But yes, Canada technically doesn't care about country of origin unless it's coming from the US, but you have to tell them where it's coming from so that they know. If you don't put country of origin, I would say that the chances of that package being inspected or opened are maybe a little bit higher, right? So just flat out tell them where it's from, and then that way, if it's not from US or Canada, depending on which way it's going, then, they're not going to bother with it. So again, if you're a Canadian customer, we'll go over the Canadian equivalent of de minimis now. If you are a Canadian customer and you are receiving something from a US seller, you will pay the 25% surtax if it's over the equivalent of Canadian $150. So it's a smaller amount because Canada's smaller. So that's $150 Canadian or $104 US if we're looking at today's exchange rate. So if you're in Canada and importing something from the US and it's under 150 Canadian, no surtax. If it's above 150, you're paying 25%. Okay, that's on some goods again, but arguably most goods as far as our vintage world is concerned. And the other thing of note on the little kind of summary of what's happened is that the 10% tariffs on China for products that are coming into the US from China or Hong Kong, that became 20% yesterday. So that's a higher tariff as well. So hearing all that, I'd love to hear your biggest concerns right now. Please feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we'll move on to what this all means for buyers and for sellers. So if you have concerns or questions still about what I've kind of talked about in terms of what's happening, let me know. Otherwise, I'll continue on. So for buyers, all of this, I think it's probably pretty obvious based on what I said. It doesn't always mean that you are paying more for the cost of your item, right? The only way that you end up paying more as a buyer is if you are in the US purchasing right now goods valued over $800 US, right? And those goods have to originally be from Canada, Mexico, China, or Hong Kong from a seller anywhere. So if you are in the US and you are ordering from a seller based in the UK and they're selling you an item that was made in Canada, then and it's over $800 US, then yes, there's going to be a tariff on that. The other way you'll pay, again, is if you're a Canadian consumer and you are, ordering certain goods that originated in the US. And in that case, you'll pay that surtax if it's over $150. So in either case, those tariffs will be, between 20 and 25%, depending on whether you're buying from, via China or Canada. So as a buyer, you can check your order value and kind of figure out what's going to happen already. But for most sellers in the space that are moving smaller items on, eBay, Etsy, wherever, it's been business as usual the last couple of days. Like they're not affected, these smaller items, right? It's only for the larger things. Another good thing for buyers is that more people, will turn to thrifting and turn to secondhand with tariffs, right? Like if the price of everything is going up, people are looking at, buying more secondhand, cheaper items, which is kind of great to see for our space. I was in a call last week and I shared this data, but I want to share it here just because it's relevant. There's a resale report coming up by ThredUp, which is, they do an annual report on what's happening in the resale market. And they said that they did this survey. They said that 60% of customers said that they think that tariffs are going to make clothing more expensive, and that means that they're going to actually start seeking out secondhand more, which is a great thing, right? And on the retailer side, 80% said that they feel that tariffs are going to affect their business and that they see resale as a more stable source of revenue now. So that's something that's really exciting to see. So if you're a buyer and you're ordering something that has a tariff, right? I think another thing to note is that these are generally small independent businesses, often operated by only one person or a very tiny team, and they just don't have the capacity to absorb that cost for their customers. So, there are scenarios where a seller might end up rolling the cost of the tariff fees into that item in terms of maybe lowering the selling price or tossing in free shipping or something like that to make it more attractive, but it's really hard on their margins as a small business. So as a buyer, you can expect that when you're looking at items that are over that duty-free exemption right now, that most of that cost will be shouldered by you as a buyer. So that's just something to be aware of. Please feel free to drop into the comments if you want to chat or you want to let me know how you're feeling about anything. For those of us who just joined us, we are kind of we've chatted a little bit about what's happening in the space, and now we're kind of looking at what it means for buyers and sellers. So for sellers, anybody who's selling online, it's like I said, it's been business as usual for the people who are selling under $800, that threshold, right? For the people who are selling above that, you know, it's tough when consumers make different decisions, and it's hard for them to replace those customers if they start losing them, right? In terms of local shops, I think local shops are seeing a little boost right now as people want to shop locally, which is really great. But in the long term, as the market sort of dips because of all this and the way that these economists are predicting, I think it's going to have a pretty profound effect on everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're online or offline. So for the sellers on the call, we can talk a little bit about what you can do right now in order to make sure that your packages keep getting across. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the tariffs on a bigger scale after that. So for sellers selling over the border, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but country of origin on all of your packages that are going across, as well as your 10-digit HTS code, which you can find on a variety of websites. You can use the Canada Post HTS code tracker. You can use the US Customs and Border Protection website for their HTS code lookup. There are many places that you can find these 10-digit codes. It's recommended that you put both of those things on if you don't want your package to be held up. It's really most important for the tariffed countries though right now. So, you know, you're also, if you know the manufacturer, they're encouraging you to include that information. It's not mandatory right now. And that is very difficult in vintage, right? Because we often don't know, right? So right now it's not required, but if you are ever filling out like a customs form via courier or Canada Post or whatever, the USPS, like if there is a field for manufacturer information and you don't know what it is, just put vintage for now. Right now it's not required information, but I think, you know, they're moving towards wanting this information. And that info, if you ever use a service that allows you to pay the duty for your customer, that info will be required. So it's just something to think about. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about what is happening on the market. I'd love to hear from you about, we heard a little bit at the beginning from Charmed about you know, how she's worried about how the market is going to affect consumer spending. So we're going to talk about that a little bit right now. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how this is going to play out, you know, as a consumer or as a seller, and what that means for you. Please feel free to drop in the comments. I know that people tend to be shy about the comments, but I know everybody has thoughts and opinions about this, so please feel free to chime in. You know, for the people who don't ship, I'm seeing a lot of like messaging like, oh, the tariffs don't apply to me, the tariffs don't apply to me. And that is great if that's the case, if that's not part of your business model as a shop. But the tariffs affect everybody. The tariffs affect us all, whether it's directly or indirectly. And the way that they're going to affect people indirectly is by rising costs, by, you know, driving inflation, by, you know, we saw the stock market tank. It's much more expensive to manufacture things within one's own country, which is what the tariffs are designed to do, right? They're designed to stimulate economic investment within a country. But the problem with that is that labor costs more, materials cost more. Sometimes you have to ship materials from, you know, here or there when it's actually cheaper to ship across the border a lot of times. So generally it causes prices to rise, right? There's also like a lot of talk of layoffs in the industry right now. Not our industry necessarily, but like a lot of industries, right? Automakers got a little break today, but it sounds like a lot of the larger scale investments that have been planned, like companies are already starting to pull back on that kind of stuff. So, you know, anybody who's been in this space for the last couple of years already knows that we've been sort of like edging on a recession. And now they're saying that we're, you know, should this trade war continue, that we will actually be in a full-on recession at that point. So there's a lot of other stuff that's happening. Transportation is more expensive, right? There's logistic challenges. There's increases in wages. There's a lot of things that are happening With rising costs in this space, sourcing becomes more difficult, right? Because we see those rising prices start to bear out in thrift stores and all kinds of places. Everybody's costs are going up. Everybody's raising their prices, right? Postmodern Bohemian, even with the US stock market going down, our dollar is very low. We're looking at the conversion estimate on eBay shipping. Yes. And that is a good thing for American customers buying from Canada. Our dollar isn't so good. The Canadian dollar isn't so good. So it's a lot more attractive for them to support sellers in Canada, which is good news, right? But yes, our dollar is very low, and that also is challenging for us in Canada. On like a global perspective. I mean, it's not good to have like a weak dollar, right? So I think, what does all of that have to do with vintage and secondhand? The point is that people, if all of this plays out, people will have less discretionary income, right? They are going to spend less. They are going to make different buying decisions. They've already started making different buying decisions, right? So when we talk about tariffs not affecting, yes, you may not have to pay the tariff on certain goods, and that's great, but we will see the impact of them across the board, absolutely. So there's, thinking about the economic times, I think preparing ourselves for that is really important. Like this, I don't want to be like doom and gloom about it, because it can be really scary and it can be really unnerving, and there's not much we can do to control it. It's just like it's happening, right? So I think the thing to think about as a buyer or a seller is like, how do I make changes now? What can I do to support the people that I want to support, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. There is like a fairly crass saying in times like this, and I want to highlight it because I think it's kind of important with context. And the saying is that we have to adapt or we have to die, right? And I don't mean that like in a negative context, like it is okay to die, quote unquote. It is okay to close a chapter, to say it's time for a new one. A lot of us may make that decision in this new period that we're in, and it's an okay one to make, right? But if that's not what you choose, then your choice is to adapt, right? And the saying is not adapt, die, or stay the same. And there's no staying the same, right? We're in a new reality. We may not like it. Our heads might be spinning all the time. Half the time, nobody knows what's going on. And it's very scary. It can be really discouraging. And I think it's important to allow ourselves to feel all that stuff. But in spite of that, we are in sort of a new era. And then we have to turn inwards and be like, okay, how do we navigate this, right? How am I going to adapt to duty-free potentially changing, right? If you're just joining us, we talked about the fact that duty-free exemptions are still in place. They are saying that they're going to be removed. So we need to think about that. We need to have that kind of like in the ether. What's going to happen if duty-free changes? What's going to happen as the market changes? Can't control any of that, right? But we can control our responses to that as buyers and sellers. We can work within those constraints. So as a buyer, that might look like recognizing that you're going to pay more to support small or to support sustainable. And as a seller, it might look like, hey, I can't reach people the way that I thought I was going to be able to reach them. And the way that it's worked for me in the past is not the way that it's going to work anymore. And maybe I need to change something up, right? So that's kind of heavy stuff, talking about the market impact and the potential market impact. I'd love it if you could tell me how you're feeling. Just drop it in the comments. I'm here to listen, and I'd love to know what you're all thinking. So in terms of what buyers can do, I think the fact that consumers are pausing to be mindful about where they are spending their dollars is a really good thing. I think it might change the way that people buy going forward, especially depending on how long this is. I mean, we saw that kind of behavior in COVID. People really wanted to support local for a little while, and that worked out really well. And, it kind of died off after a while, but this could have longer term impacts depending on how long it goes on, right? So I think as a consumer, thinking more about buying what we need, understanding that prices are going to go up, like I mentioned before, making smarter saving decisions so that we can have those in pieces that are great investments. buying things like vintage and secondhand, right? So that they're good quality, they last for a long time, right? You're making a better buying choice. And then thrifting more, like I said, that's a positive thing to come out of this. Some consumers are going to shop locally if that's important to them during this time. You know, you're going to see a lot of that. Locally means our bricks and mortar stores, of course, but it also means some of the businesses in your local area that operate online. I'm a big fan of shopping local. I've said that multiple times on these calls, but it's not the only way through a crisis like this, right? Vintage and secondhand businesses on both sides of the border are going to be challenged by this, particularly if that duty-free exemption gets lifted. So, you know, Canadian businesses rely on American customers, American businesses rely on Canadian customers, and none of these small businesses asked for this. Most of them didn't anyway. Maybe some of them did, but no one really wanted this. So I think if you are a buyer and you're sort of seeking that special piece and you find it at a US-based shop, you know, I always say you're still shopping small, you're still supporting sustainable, right? And I think having that mindset that you're making a worthy effort is a good thing. Voting with your dollars is really all you can do as a buyer, right? Making that decision that's best for you. And for some people, like I said, it's going to be shopping within their own country, and that's okay. And for others, it's going to be shopping small. And, you know, at least as far as vintage and secondhand is concerned, the trade war is about items that are manufactured in the countries that are involved, right? So many of these sellers are selling stuff from other countries. So that's something to keep in mind too, right? The business owners in the involved countries didn't ask for this. And so, you know, if you're very keen to shop based on country of origin, you can get that information when you're looking at an online listing. A lot of sellers do know that information. Sometimes they don't. But they'll include like made in the USA or made in England or made in India or whatever. And you can make those decisions. You can get more granular about it if that's a value that you're holding right now as you're navigating all of this. I heard a really like heartwarming story today, and I wanted to share it. 2 Canadian sellers told me that they received orders from American customers saying that they just wanted to support a small business in Canada. They left them a note on the order. And I just thought that was really lovely to see something like that, that people are, you know, making those efforts. They're voting with their dollars. They're saying, hey, I don't necessarily support this trade war, and I want to make sure that you get some business during that time. So as a buyer, you do have a lot of power. I know it feels like we're powerless a lot of the time, but you can make those kinds of decisions for yourself. If you're just joining us, we're just talking a little bit about what buyers can do during this time before we get into what sellers can do. I'd love to hear from you if you have ideas in terms of steps that buyers can take as we are figuring all of this out. All right, what else do I want to talk about here? Let's see. So yeah, I talked a little bit about ordering from other countries. You know, if you are in the US and you order from a Canadian business, if they ship you a product that was made in India, it's not part of the tariffs, right? These are just items that were made in Canada. And then same way, if you're in Canada and you're ordering, you know, a product that was made in Canada from a US seller or something, that won't be tariffed because you're in Canada ordering a Canadian product. So I think education is kind of our best friend as a consumer. It's the thing that we have, trying to figure out the most information we can when we are making a buying decision. And I think that has better long-term effects as well in terms of slowing us down when we buy, right? If we're looking for manufacturing information, if we're looking for extra details on country of origin or on the order value, then it's sort of making you have that less of that instant, I need this right now, and you actually maybe think about your purchase a little bit more, which is, I think, a positive thing, right? So the other thing we can always do is find community, and thank you for the people that have joined tonight. It's been nice to see some people coming out. Shout out for coming here. And then if you missed me at the top, I was talking a little bit about the Shop Secondhand directory. If you are looking for secondhand businesses to support, In your area, it covers Canada and the US. So you can visit it at secondhanddirectory.com. We have over 3,000 vintage, antiques, and secondhand businesses listed in more than 130 categories. We are adding more all the time. If you are a vendor, you can list there for free. And there are filters with ships to Canada and ships to the US. You can use them, you can check those off. And as a buyer, it's free to search. You can search using those filters as well. So link for that is in my bio. I'd love to know if you're a buyer on the call, or even if you're a seller who buys whatever, if you've ever been surprised by unexpected duties. I always love to hear if people take the time to like try and figure out if they're going to be hit with that customs or duties or not, or if you've like had something arrive at your door and then suddenly you're paying $50 for it. That has definitely happened to me. Just ordering something and not really realizing, and then they come to collect at the door and you're like, oh God, I didn't know about this. And you don't really have a choice at that point, but it's always just curious, because I love to be able to tell sellers if there's more things that they can do to make it clearer for buyers. Like if there is going to be a tariff or a fee, then let me know, and then I'll tell the sellers. I think that would be helpful for everybody if you had more information. Yes, Rediscovered on Marsh has also done the thing where you have to pay surprise duties at the door. Luckily, that won't be happening for the most part right now, as that duty-free exemption is still in place, but it's always good to just really be thorough, especially if you're buying online. Be thorough and read that listing over very carefully to get as much information as you can. Know where it's coming from, have that pause to be like, okay, maybe you're ordering something over $800 just for argument's sake. And having that moment where you're like, oh, it's a product of Canada if I'm in the US, and that will trigger that thing to be like, okay, I'm going to have to pay a little bit more for this item, right? Okay, so sellers, I want to talk a little bit about the sellers. If there's any buyers on the call that aren't interested in this, feel free to drop off. But I want to talk about what sellers can do, kind of like the next steps as we are looking at the next few weeks anyway, to see what happens. I would love if anybody in the comments could weigh in if you have been through a recessionary period with your business before, and if you have any advice for the people who feel nervous during this time. I know that this is potentially, we had a low point after the COVID boost, but this is potentially going to be a more prolonged lower point. So I'd love to hear if you've ever had like a recession in your business and you have advice for people, please drop it in the comments. Postmodern Bohemian, eBay's combined international shipping is the worst. Sellers really have no control over it. eBay just sticks duties on everything. Yikes. Hopefully not right now. Hopefully there's some oversight on making sure that they're not hitting you with duties when they're not supposed to be with that exemption. But yeah, a lot of the stuff is out of the control, right, of the sellers. And I think that's a great thing to point out for buyers as well. That, I said before, like nobody asked for this, and it's not a business's, they're not the ones charging you the tariff. It is the government that's charging you the tariff. So being kind to one another is always good during periods like this. So for sellers, I think talking a little bit about things that we can do, right? I think now is a really great time to tell people your story, to let them know how this affects you, of course. I think everybody's like kind of sharing how they're feeling about this period right now, but to really take the chance to tell a buyer why they should want to buy from you over a large corporation, right? That's always been the best part about small and independent businesses, is telling people what makes you different from ordering from Amazon or Shein or all that kind of stuff. And to message what makes the most sense for you and your buyers during this time. I think buy local, buy American, buy Canadian, buy borderless, support free trade, whatever the message that you have is. There are many messages to have right now. Try and figure out who your customer base is and really try to lean into that, right? there are going to be people that service customers on both sides of the border, and they're going to have a different message than somebody who has a very localized business. So and that's, if you're a buyer too, you're going to see like mixed messaging. What should I do? What should I do? But for a seller, now's the time to kind of like pick your narrative, if you will, and kind of lean into it. I think thinking about where the customer is as well right now, a lot of people are nervous. They're already nervous. They're feeling like, oh no, if everything's going to be more expensive, like it causes people to not want to buy, right? So I think meeting them where they're at, recognizing the fact that people maybe have less money during this time. Obviously not everybody. There's always going to be a huge range of people and income levels and what they're able to spend and all that kind of stuff. But trying to recognize that the customer might be making more difficult decisions than they have in the past, and giving them roads into your business is maybe a good thing to consider right now. Making more pricing options visible. So maybe you have like an online store and you've got like a section under $50 or a section under $25, or it's on your website or wherever. Just having more options and being aware that people are shopping with value in mind right now. Messaging secondhand value is another angle. That's a great one. Rediscovered on Marsh. Good one. This is the time to push the value of vintage and secondhand as a smart investment, right? Like the quality, the uniqueness, the fact that it's sustainable. Work it in wherever you can. Make it one of the things that you talk the most about. This is like your time to really be like, this is a great investment. It's, stuff that lasts. It's all that kind of stuff. So those are good ways to reach customers. If anybody else has any other ideas, let us know in the comments. I have many, as always, so we'll keep sharing. I think bundling is another thing that we can. I was supposed to talk about bundling on one of these hotlines in a more detailed way, and one day we'll get to it when we're not talking about tariffs anymore. But bundling is another way to increase the value for the consumer in terms of like the perceived value, I guess, but also in terms of like your order value, right? If you're able to put things together, combined items, offer like a slight discount by doing multiples, all that kind of stuff, is a good way to appeal to consumers right now, right? Make them feel like they're getting more bang for their buck. Payment plans are another thing you could try. I mean, I think some of the marketplaces like offer this kind of stuff already, but if you have higher ticket items, there are services that you can, have people pay in installments. That's something that you can do as well. Customer appreciation, I think, is kind of a big one right now. Letting people know that you're grateful for their business, as much as you can. There's, whether it's your local business or whether it's international business or whatever, I think just recognizing people right now as they're being faced with all of these decisions that they have to make as a buyer, it's a good time to just sort of like pop up back in their world and let them know that you appreciate them, right? Cash flow, obviously a big thing during times like this, for business owners. Looking at your expenses, looking at your inventory, where can you trim here and there, right? Maybe cutting down on sourcing trips to save a bit of gas, or, to sell the inventory that you have. I would say that during times like this, marketing is not a non-essential. So marketing is an essential. So, you don't want people to forget about you during this kind of period. So keeping your boosted posts, like making sure that you're spending that money to get in front of people, I think is important right now, because there's a lot of noise out there and you want to be able to sort of like float to the top, or you want to be able to be seen at all, right? So it's one thing to have this great message about buy local or buy Canadian or buy American or buy borderless or whatever your message is, but if nobody's seeing it, then that's a problem. So making sure that you are not considering that like promotion thing as a non-essential, because I know that that's one of the first things that people want to cut down on when they're looking at trimming business costs. So Diversification, another thing for right now. I mean, if you're a seller and you're selling on one platform, it might be time to look at another one, or how you can work another one in just to get in front of more people. There's lots of things that you can do to diversify revenue that doesn't involve like a marketplace or an online thing or adding an extra market or whatever. I mean, you could offer like a class or a workshop if you have a physical space, charge tickets. I got an email today about a downsizing. It was like a news story, I think, and it was about a downsizing service. And then I thought, like, a seller could offer some kind of workshop on downsizing your space, right? And like offer tickets, and maybe like as part of your ticket, you walk through that person's space and give them like an estimate or something. Like, there's different ways that you can come up with bits of revenue to supplement you, especially if you do start to see a change in your regular customer base at times like this. I think, what else do I want to talk about? Talking about customers, where they're at, we talked about that. We talked about value of secondhand, emphasizing the practicality of secondhand as well, right? Functional, the fact that these items are timeless, versatile. These are all major selling points of selling secondhand, selling vintage, selling antiques. So now's the time to let people know about them, like kind of shout it from the rooftops. This is the time to tell people that this is the sustainable choice. This is all the things, right? Like, this is what makes you different from those bottom of the barrel kind of places. Nostalgia is another really big thing, especially during periods of recession. We saw that in COVID as well. I mean, it was before things kind of got recession-y after COVID, but right in the thick of COVID, people started really turning to nostalgia for comfort, right? Because it's got that sort of makes you feel good thing. And I think a lot of people right now, if they're not completely dissociating, are looking for things that will provide them comfort, because everything in the world is very hard right now, right? Like, you turn on the news and it's just it's chaos and it's scary and it's stressful. So people are looking for things to make them feel good. So that's something that you can show people when you're advertising the things in your shop, right? When you're promoting the things in your shop, like that familiarity, the feeling of your grandma's basement, the fun retro toys from when you were a kid. I literally just got a Polly Pocket the other day. I'm 38 years old. But I had that like moment where I was like, oh, how cute would that be on my shelf, right? And I ordered that from a vintage seller. So I think people are looking for that kind of special thing that makes them feel good right now. Even if it's, times are tight, people are still looking for ways to have those moments of joy, I think. We've talked about subscription boxes on these hotlines before, but I think that's another thing you could do quarterly. Sell it as like sort of a treat during this time. Not shying away from the fact that a lot of people have less to spend, right? But maybe you message it as a way to like indulge yourself when the world is literally imploding around you, right? Like a like quarterly box that arrives to their house of some decor items or, closet items or whatever, at an accessible price point is a way to sort of drive recurring revenue that doesn't necessarily rely on like those products in their shop having to turn over all the time, right? Community is a good thing. I mentioned it earlier. Finding community is good right now for buyers, but it's also good for sellers and a way for you to engage with your buyer base, right? Like your community. So hosting more live sales, starting to like build those relationships, starting a consistent content series is another great thing to do. Like, so many of you all have a lot of knowledge, and I think that it's an easy way to stay on top of mind for people. If you have like a, handbag of the week history lesson, or like here's how I thrift like a pro, and like every week you share like 7 tips or something like that, and make it that something that people want to keep coming back for, to sort of make them feel more attached to you, right? Gift guides with affordable vintage finds. That's another fun way. Again, not not ignoring the fact that people are spending differently right now, I think is a good thing. They'll feel more seen if you are kind of meeting them where they're at. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think your story is what sells you right now as a seller. So finding ways to share that story is kind of the main thing. I'd love to know if anybody has any further comments in the or questions. If you missed us at the top when we were kind of going over some of the actual mechanics of the duties and the tariffs, feel free to chime in with a question if you want. But I think that's kind of all I had for this evening. I just wanted to touch base and just talk a little bit about what's happened over the last couple of days and what we're expecting to see. We really don't know, right? And that's kind of the worst part of this. But as a buyer, when you don't know, it's kind of just, like I said earlier, business as usual, as long as you're ordering things that are under a certain amount. And if you're a seller, the fact that you don't know is stressful, can be stressful. But it also means that we want to start thinking about the things that could happen and planning and like thinking a little bit more long-term about what this might mean for your business and any of the changes that you might need to make based on all these factors that might be happening. Tariffs, duty-free, the market changing, all that kind of stuff. It's just good to sort of think about that kind of stuff and not shy away from it and let it percolate a little bit. So if you found this conversation helpful, I hope that you did. Conversation with me talking, I feel like, but I appreciated your comments throughout. It was nice to hear from all of you. And if you have any topics that you want to talk about in the future, let me know. I hope to, by April, have the tariff war over and that we won't be talking about tariffs again. That'd be great. But feel free to shoot me a message anytime. And if you'd like to support my work, you can visit my website and click support our work to find out how. So thanks so much for coming out, and I will see you all next time.